Hello, everyone. James Anastasiades with Off the Court, and I'm super excited to have assistant coach of the men's basketball team, Michael Thomas, also former Rainbow Warrior player for the basketball team, the 2013 through 17 seasons. Mike, thank you for coming onto the podcast, and congratulations on finishing your first season with the Warriors. What's it like coming back to Hawaii and being able to coach where you played?
Man, it's been awesome. You have so much investment. I'm sure you know this as well too. So much investment in this place, so much love from the people and for this program and for our athletic department in the school. So to be here is a dream come true, but it's also, it's been a ton of work. It's been fun. But I love our guys. I love what we're doing. I love the culture we're building. So I'm really grateful to be here.
That's super awesome. And Mike, can you just talk a little bit about your experience and what it was like playing at UH? It is a pretty incredible place to be. There's no pro teams in Hawaii. So a lot of times, we get the example of we get treated like pro athletes. You've definitely played in front of a couple of sold out crowds in the now Simplify Stan Sheriff Arena. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about your experience at Hawaii?
Yeah, I think I can start even before when I was getting recruited here. I think coming out here and realizing what it was and the type of people that were going to be here, the media that follows you, and how the community kind of rallies around our teams here. It was unbelievable for me to see the level of support. It mirrors a high major program, even wherever we're placed in that whole grand scheme of things, right? But being a player here was something that I wouldn't trade for the world. I think being able to hold that responsibility of being in the public eye, being able to support not only a town like Honolulu, but the whole state of Hawaii and represent that on your chest and on your back. Was a big deal, in my opinion, and it taught me a lot. I was talking to my fiance earlier today about, she was like, well, you're not going to get really prepared for the interview. I'm like, man, we've had 10 years of training for this, going to the University of Hawaii, being in interviews nonstop and being around the media like that. And so I think having that responsibility, but also just enjoying every second of it, being able to play here, being able to go to the beach, being able to make new friends and dive into a different culture was a lot of fun. And then the success that comes with it, obviously, my team was able to make the tournament one year. Like you said, we were able to play in front of a lot of sellout crowds in the arena, and there's nothing like that feeling as well, too. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's super awesome. So just kind of one thing to piggyback off, did you ever feel any kind of like stress, or was there a little bit more pressure maybe due to the media that comes with playing at Hawaii? Because, there's cameras around you all the time. You're running from practice to interview to class to homework. Like, I kind of understand where you're coming from with that schedule. Did that put any extra pressure on you? If it did, can you kind of elaborate on like how you would deal with it? Maybe was it talking to coaches and them helping you out a little bit, figuring out what that life balance would be like?
Yeah, I think I'll say this. From my freshman to sophomore year, it was more noise than pressure. And so I was never fearful to take interviews. I was never fearful to say anything that I needed to in the interviews. I knew how to conduct myself, and there wasn't a stage fright element to it, but there was, there's blogs and there's different forums and different things that people are going to put their input, which they're entitled to, right? But if you can continually focus on that, it's not going to be healthy for you. And I think I did for my first couple of years. I would religiously go to one of our sites where people can bag on us, or people can praise us, and to hang your confidence and your performance and your value on a lot of the things of people that on a lot of the words that other people are saying can be difficult for you. And I think that's where it applied pressure. I think it changed how I was going into games. It changed how I was attacking my academics. It changed my mental and emotional fatigue as I went through the day sometimes, because I'm constantly thinking and dwelling on those words. And so that was the biggest thing. I think in action against it, I merely just shut it down. I blocked those sites from my computer and from my phone, and really just took some time away, because I needed to not hear that noise. I needed to be myself. I needed to be who I needed to be for my team, and ultimately for the university. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's pretty incredible. I couldn't agree with you more. In the volleyball world, we do have this one site. It's called Volley Talk, where pretty much anyone's kid, mother, father, grandmother, grandfather could go on and just write whatever opinion they want on it. And I do know for a fact, I've been there. It's kind of like after a game or after a practice, or that during that recruiting season, you're opening that up just to see where do I stand compared to everyone? And at the end of the day, I think something that's super important to really realize about that is their opinions don't really matter. Like, especially when you're getting recruited somewhere, that coach that recruited you definitely saw something in you. So being able to like have open conversations with them really helps, I think. So that's awesome. And then, so you graduated in 2017 and then
2018.
18. Okay. So what did you do between 17 and 18?
I was a redshirt. So
Okay.
I broke my right wrist 2016-17 season and sat out that year.
Awesome. So this is pretty awesome conversation then. Obviously going through injury, especially maybe your senior year, like your true senior year, I guess, could be super stressful. So how was that experience for you? And maybe how did you deal with that? What were some things that maybe helped you get away from the frustration of sitting on the sidelines and watching your senior year? Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, I think I broke my wrist in the summertime, and then was able to have surgery, I believe, in August or July, end of July. I want to say that year in 2016. And our team was under a lot of scrutiny just because of the NCAA position that we were in. We had a postseason ban that year. We had lost a scholarship, and so a lot of people can look at that situation and go, "Oh, well, it was a perfect year for him to sit out anyway." But I think my investment in that team was still at 110%. And so it was really difficult for me to see a lot of things, for me to communicate things, but not be able to show and be there with my team a lot of the time. And that really weighed on me more than the injury did, in a sense. I think the injury originally was difficult just because I knew I was going to be away from what I love to do for a long time, but it also gave me some time to really reflect, to focus on my academics, to focus on myself, my person, my diet, and a lot of my being, if that makes sense, spiritually as well. And so that part was good for me, but I think the investment that I had in the team was really difficult to not be able to be out there, not be able to practice. I didn't practice a single time that whole year. And little things like that, they weigh on your connection with your teammates. I don't think people realize how close that brotherhood is or that sisterhood is when it comes to your teammates. That was the most difficult part is I'm yelling things, I'm trying to coach them up and different things like that. And I'm sounding more and more disconnected. The more I get on them, the more I voice these opinions without being on the court and playing with them. And so that was a difficult portion for me. But yeah, it was
yeah. So did you realize in that moment that maybe you were getting disconnected, or is that something that you reflected on now and kind of looking back, you're just kind of like, oh?
I think a little bit of both. I think we had two good players and leaders on that team who would come and communicate with me like, hey, we need you to kind of relax a little bit, or we need you to be in it with us, talk to us a different way, be able to lead in a different way than voicing frustration. I think that frustration was coming out in my injury as well too. But just being able to speak to them properly and it wasn't like I was being demeaning or anything like that. I think just with a coach's voice on top of you and then one of your teammates who you see and are in like personal settings as well with, aside from the game, really difficult at times. And so I realized it in that moment when they would talk to me, but also looking back, like as a coach now, I'm like, okay, yeah, there is a distinction. You have to be able to communicate a little differently as a player who's out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So you graduated and then you kind of went into the realm of a performance coach, correct?
Correct. So I when I left the university, I played for the Utah Jazz's G League team for a really small stint in 2018, the beginning of that G League season, which is the G League is like the developmental league for the NBA.
Yeah.
And then around February of 2019, I started with a company called Athletic Gains. And so they've been a prominent company. They've done a ton of NFL and NBA, as well as MLB draft classes and professional off seasons, as well as having their own private sector and personal clientele too. And so really got into that. That's where I trained going into my professional career before I ended it. And I just really had a liking to the people there, to the owner and the founder of the company. And they had a liking to me as well and wanted me to get involved. And so, yeah.
That's awesome. So can you talk a little bit about that experience? Just because a couple things that I kind of want you to touch up on, and maybe I may be wrong, but some things that I noticed is I do know at UH, there's a certain type of strength and conditioning that a lot of the strength and conditioning coaches follow. And obviously they kind of have to because you're dealing with a lot of athletes. A lot of times you can't really specify what you want to work on certain athletes. Like, oh, maybe this guy needs to work on a little bit more on speed. We got to get this guy a little bit stronger. And maybe, this guy just needs to work a little bit on their cardio, like get their endurance up. Can you talk about the differences that you saw the strength and conditioning at UH and just kind of at that facility that you were at prior? Because it seemed like it was a little bit more functional training where you were post-graduation. where I think in college, we just try to get as big, fast, and strong as possible.
Yeah.
So, you know, kind of going through both, and I know I've seen you in the weight room a couple of times. You do a little bit of that functional training now. Can you just touch up on the two benefits, I guess, of both of them in your experience?
Absolutely. And I can speak kind of now. I'm the liaison right now between our strength coach and the coaching staff and the team, when it comes to just figuring out a plan, scheduling, and a lot of that different stuff. And I don't think either is wrong. You know what I mean? Like I think there can be a common misconception that you have to negate one for the other to thrive, right? But you need a little bit of both. And I think we integrated a lot of the bigger, faster, stronger stuff into our performance training on certain days, right? I think the benefit of the bigger, faster, stronger, more strength and conditioning is that your endurance, your muscle stamina, and a lot of different things are going to build at a rapid pace. There are certain guys that come into college that are not ready physically. And when you go through the performance chamber, it's taking somebody who has already had that foundation of knowing how to lift weights, being in a weight room with other people and different things like that, and now turning it into high level athletic performance. So I'd say the benefit of that is creating a foundation, understanding the weight room, understanding how to be around weights, understanding how to lift, understanding how to different form and techniques, and also what exercises are going to build muscle the fastest, are going to build size the fastest, and all those different things. Because when you come into college, I mean, if you're 170 pounds at the small forward position, there's going to be a guy who's 6'5", 205 pounds at that same position that has a 30-pound advantage on you. And so there are different things that you just learn in that weight room that you cannot trade anywhere else. You need that stuff to go into performance. And then I'll speak on, like, when it comes to performance training, I think it's so specialized. You know, one of our main tactics was not having more than 6 or 8 people in a class when we would do our training athletic games, because you want everybody to get that same individual care and treatment. You're working on a lot more core development and strength. You're working on a lot more mobility and being able to expand the joints and muscles and a lot of the fulcrums and different areas of your body that are going to open up so that you can create more strength in those areas. If you can stretch those areas more, that means there's more potential for them to be stronger, which means you can put more force into different movements and actions. So now that's why you see a lot of guys in the NBA, in AVP, in the NFL, in baseball, being able to be those high level athletes. It's because their body has absorbed a lot of that training and opened up a lot more potential and area and space for them to be powerful. So yeah, I would say those are the two the differences, and that's what makes them both really dope. I think one is foundational and then the other is more advanced, but they're both needed. They're both necessary.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm glad that you kind of made that distinction, because I think a lot of kids nowadays, you know, with social media, they may be following 20 different fitness pages that one tells them, oh, you should do this. One tells them, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. You should do this. Oh, no, you shouldn't be front squatting. You should be back squatting. And I think the frustration comes with, because I've been here before early on in my college career, I was just like, I want the shortcut to become the most athletic as possible. And like, when you're constantly looking at all these different avenues and ways of strength and conditioning, I think it becomes a world, like, you get so lost in, okay, but which one's actually right? I love that you kind of touched up on, there's no right or wrong, but a mix of everything can definitely help a lot of your performance in different ways. And so, can you kind of touch upon, you did mention that you took your nutrition a little bit more serious when you were injured. Can you talk about your experience, I guess, as an athlete, and kind of the way maybe you took, what things did you do differently that helped with your nutrition, I guess, that 1 year you were injured?
You know, I'll say this too. It starts with financial understanding. And so if you know your budget, if you are strict on your budget, and understand exactly where you need to put your money into to make sure that you're getting the most out of your body, especially as a student athlete. I'm only speaking to student athletes right now. Then you will have a much better time. If you're kind of flying on the whim financially, if you're buying things you shouldn't be buying, if you're going out and shopping a ton, if you're going on dates and you know what I mean, having a lot of social hour and different things like that, your diet and your performance is going to suffer from it. And it's a direct correlation, or I should say it's a more indirect correlation. You know, sometimes people can't do all that stuff, and if they have the money, they can do both, and it works for them. But as a student athlete, if you're surviving on your scholarship check, you have to make sure that you're devoting a lot of that to either your rent and then your food to do the best you can to go forward from there. And so that was the biggest thing for me to start with, was understanding my financial situation, understanding how to get the most out of my money in that moment. But when it came to diet, I think taking nutritional advice from our strength coach, and really trying to limit a lot of the things that were slowing me down. So a lot of the fats, making sure that they were true fats and healthy fats and lipids, understanding carbohydrates and the right types to take and the right ways to take them, taking more complex carbs. I think your protein, not being too saturated with those. I think not having too much sodium in those, and making sure that my processed sugar was at the least it could be going into that year. I feel like also knowing what would give me energy and what I could take on rest days. You know, a cheat day shouldn't be, in my opinion, a cheat day shouldn't be a day where you're not going to work out and eating fast food. You know what I mean? A cheat day should be a day where maybe you're getting recovery stretches and you're going to yoga, you're doing something like that, and you're having a nice acai bowl, and you're kind of keeping things light because you know every single day kind of counts. And so understanding a lot of those little different tactics and growing upon those. By no means am I a nutritionist, but I understood just a lot more of that stuff. And so it's about curving your diet. You know, nobody's perfect, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So you were player, going to the performance coaching side of things, and then you decide to come back as a coach. I guess my big question is, what sparked that want to come back to Hawaii as a coach?
You know, and I hope I don't upset Tanner with this statement. My whole goal was to work at Athletic Gains, try to train there for 10 summers, right? Develop all the intel I could. And I wanted to come out here. I knew that, like, over time, NIL and the business side of the NCAA was going to start progressing. They talked about it since 2015, 16. And my goal was to eventually move in Athletic Gains out here, be able to run my own company in that way, and then be the strength coach for the basketball team for Hawaii. And that was, I think I was being a little short-sighted in that, and not thinking that I could be a basketball coach as well, too. But my goal was always come back regardless, and be able to be a part of the community and be at the university again. I had multiple conversations with Coach Kanat in the summer of 2021 that were pretty random to me. You know, we had connected. He would come back to town and recruit, and we'd get lunch and just talk about life and talk about where we were going through and what's happening and stuff, and how my life was trajecting and how he was doing. But he started to be more intentional about the conversation of coaching. And we had some honest talks, and I was just letting him know where I was at in life was a little different than most people that would step into the profession. And so he kind of responded with an opportunity of a lifetime, in a sense, and being able to be an assistant coach at this high of a level. And, you know, like it's like a kid who randomly makes it to the NBA from like the smallest town in the middle of nowhere, not even in America, right? And it's the way I got into this is a very long shot, in my opinion. I was 26 years old when I accepted the job and was able to come out here. Most people have to become a manager, GA, you know what I mean? Ops, video coordinator, all these different things. To become an assistant coach is very difficult. This is a very, very cutthroat market, and it requires a lot of work and a lot of attention to detail. And so for him to trust me with that was a huge deal. But I knew the task would be tall, and I'm a quick learner and understand a lot of things as I progress, and try to make them the best things that I can be. So I think going into coaching at that time felt like a decision that would be difficult, but it was good.
100%. And like you said, I do think Hawaii basketball is very fortunate and blessed to have Tanner, because I know how he works. We have conversations together all the time. I mean, I get advice from him because I just finished up my master's in kinesiology as well. So I would always bounce ideas off him, get any advice I could when it came to, the man is smart, dude. He knows his stuff. And like, what I love about Tanner is I've noticed that he never really gives the basketball players anything that he's never tried.
Exactly.
You know, he won't ever be like, oh, hey, I saw this crazy thing, I'm going to have you guys try it. It's like, no, I'm going to test it out for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and then I'm going to have you guys do it. And I think that's it speaks a lot about, first of all, what kind of person he is, but it also just kind of speaks of like how good of a strength and conditioning coach he is. So the UH basketball is very blessed to have Tanner. And obviously, I mean, he's doing a lot of good work with that program. So
absolutely. I mean,
I know it's awesome. But yeah, like you said, I mean, that's a crazy opportunity. It's 26 years old to come back, do all that. But I mean, we're seeing it, I think, a little bit more and more at Hawaii. And what I love, it's kind of keeping its roots, which I think is a good thing. Like with Kupono Faye now getting hired at the volleyball assistant coaching position. I believe he's only 26 years old as well. We're seeing a little theme. So hey, graduating players, make sure you stick around a little bit. Never know what could happen. But no, that's cool. So, I was fortunate enough my last season. I managed the team. I took that GA position. Did help coach on the sidelines a little bit, whether the coaches liked it or not. But I love the sport of volleyball. I was blessed to learn a lot about it at a young age, and I love the coaching side. But I would argue that even just taking that 1 year off of not really coaching, but sitting on the sidelines of where I used to be and observing, I noticed a lot of things that I guess if I were to put myself back in those shoes, I would have done totally different. And even now when I play volleyball, like I've been playing in what they're trying to create, the pro league in America. I do take a lot of what I observed that 1 year with me. And I would argue like I'm not in nearly as good shape as I used to be when I was playing in college, but like I'm probably playing some of the best volleyball I've been playing ever, just because I took that time off to really study and learn the game. So can you talk a little bit about maybe that experience for you, being on the sideline and coaching it for this past year? What have you noticed as a coach compared to being in the player's position?
The amount of time and detail that we put into scheme, and what recruiting means when it comes to that, what our development for our players means when it comes to that. I think that's the biggest thing. If I would have known, there's so many things as a player that you're thinking about, like I got to be this guy, I got to play this way, I have to do all these different things. But if there's so many little jobs that I knew I was capable of back then that I didn't think were cool, that I didn't think were worth much, that if I would have gone back and done, my professional career would have taken a major stride because of it. And I think looking at defensive principles, understanding lanes and gaps, looking at, and I was pretty good at that, but I could have been a much better reader when it came to, and like an instigator, if that makes sense, on defense, when it came back to playing. Offensively, I think being decision makers, understanding exactly where to get to make sure that your teammate is becoming a better player on the opposite side of the court is a huge deal, especially in our game because of how defenses are collapsing on heavy drivers and different things like that. I think the ability to play 5 different styles of basketball. Not many people understand that. But this is why the U.S. struggled a little bit when they went to the Olympics last year, was because there was a different brand of basketball. It was cleaner. It was more physical. There was things were being called that they had never been called for before. And I think if players can understand that certain games are going to be a super physical, get to 2 feet, be structured game. Some games are going to be a lot faster in transition, a lot more helter-skelter. Certain games are going to emphasize shooting more. Certain games are going to emphasize paint play more. There's a whole bunch of different things. I don't know if you understand a lot of this stuff.
No, I do a little bit.
There's a bunch of different things that I feel like if I were to analyze that mind of the game instead of just being in it and like, oh, my body is going through this every day. Oh, we're having to do this. You know what I mean? It would have been way different for my career, in my opinion. But I do understand what you're saying. There's just different reads. I can be 40 pounds overweight and I still know I can get to a certain spot. I can make a certain play. I can make this shot because they can't defend it in this way. Yeah. Like there's just certain things that you realize over time. So I think that you're absolutely right on that.
And like I would argue, like I've made the argument, and it happens in beach volleyball all the time. Like you have a 21-year-old that's jumping 40 inches, that's ridiculously athletic, that gets outbeat by a 40-year-old that's been on the beach for the past 30 years just because he understands the game so much more than you do,
Roll shot, get your athleticism, get you.
Yeah, no, straight up, So I guess my piggyback off of that is, do you think that as a player, should we be spending a little bit more time on maybe like the philosophy and like understanding the game a little bit more than we do?
Yeah, I think
so. For a young basketball player, I guess, that's listening to this podcast right now, like what would be a couple things that you recommend to them to do outside of, and this is the whole part of like off the court, is so many times we get stuck in that mentality. It's like, I'm just gonna go to the gym and rep it out. It's like, yeah, but are you going to benefit more from doing that? Or are you going to benefit more of like, hey, let's watch film or like really understand this concept of basketball, volleyball, football, this and that? Because I think that knowledge not only will excel the reps that you end up going and doing after, but I think that knowledge gives you a peace of mind during the game as well. So I guess to a young basketball player wants to improve, and we're taking reps out of the way, you can't go into the gym, like what would be something that you recommend to them?
Yeah, I think, and I'll speak slowly on this. You have to be a fan of the competition, because that's what should excite you as a young player and student athlete. The competition should be what excites you. Seeing guys go at each other mano a mano should be the entertainment, right? But when it comes to the skill level, you have to understand the reads that they're making from their skill. So you might see a guy do crazy moves, understand what the defense is doing in response to those moves, and then how your body can manipulate the defense in that same way when it comes to an individual deal. Not so much repping it out on the court and understanding that, but seeing, okay, like him going in and out this way freed up the guy next to him's defender because he had to help because he thought a middle drive was happening at that time. Getting to a baseline and selling an in and out on the baseline brings over two different help defenders. Look at what's happening on the weak side and how they can play off of that. See what the next move is from those different positions of decision making, if that makes sense. I think you have to look at the whole court. So many times we're just staring at the ball. As basketball players, as coaches, as whatever, you're staring at the ball. Look at sets. Look at how a coach is setting up his team to get a certain player wide open. A perfect example is the Warriors. If you look at Steph Curry, if there's a guy with the ball anywhere around him and there's another player without it with him, they cut in opposite directions just to throw the defense and see if you can get an exchange there. Basketball is all about exchanges, whether it's a handoff, whether it's a pass, whether it's a read with your eyes and everything. Mm-hmm. You're looking to see if you can get a step, just one step on the defender to create a disadvantage or a mismatch on the opposite side of the court. And so if you can understand those certain things, you'll understand how to play with other people, but you also understand how to create opportunities for yourself and change the game in a very drastic way. It teaches you how to read the game instead of just seeing it entertaining and it being all about, what guys with the ball have, Yeah. So I think that's the biggest thing, because anybody can get in the gym and make 100 or 1,000 shots. That just takes time and repetition, but not everybody can read the game to where they're actually affecting the game at a very high level. And those are hard to come by. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice, because like we've mentioned, is seeing the game from the outside perspective. And I think the cool thing is, like, you've been fortunate enough to do it at a very young age as well, right? Like you're not looking back on this after being away for maybe 20 years and then you come back and look at it from the sidelines, like you just got done not too long ago and you're looking back and you're like, oh, young Mike could have done something a little bit different. So, I mean, it's always cool to be able to like look back and reflect on that. So I always tell kids, like, dude, if you have an older age group practicing, go and watch what they're doing and like really pay attention to the little details and try and become a coach of the game. So I think the big thing that I've noticed that's really helped me is I look at certain things when I'm watching volleyball or when I was watching like 2 years ago at practice alone. And I'm like, dude, why are you trying to go for the crazy play? Like all you got to do is tip roll shot, line was open, you're good to go. Right. But I think we get stuck in these mindsets where it's just like, oh, I got to make the fancy crazy play. It's like, I think we lose sight, especially in volleyball. Like it's a simple game, pass, set, hit, it's don't over try to complicate it. And I think nowadays with all like social media and all this and that, like we're trying to make it fancy for the video, but at the end of the day, it's winning games. Right. So I just think it's really cool to like talk about and like look back on. So couple more questions as we're finishing up right now. What was one of your favorite recovery modalities in college? Was it ice bath, foam rolling? Were you the stem guy, like just going hook up to stem? Stem feels good.
I was a big yoga advocate, believe it or not. So,
I'm a huge fan of that because I did yoga very religiously for my last 2 seasons, and I saw huge benefits to it.
Correct. So I want to say finishing out my redshirt year, and then all the way through my last year, 2017-18, I was a member. I am gonna boost them. Core Power Yoga, and they have a multitude of different classes, right? And so
I used to go there too. I know what it's like.
There's I think C1 was great for like post game, summertime when I'm in the middle of trying to get in the best shape of my life. C2, as well as their more of their HIIT class. I forget the name of it.
Yeah.
Was good for that as well. But I think just being able to feel my joints, to loosen up and lubricate a lot of those different muscles made it to where I didn't have to stay in the training room too much. You get bumps and bruises and things like that, but if you can keep it to that, that was really good for me. And I think I'm more of an active prehab than a post-recovery guy. I always got my ice after games. I always got rolled ankles and different things like that. I'm always going to get them in ice, right? But in the game ready. Yeah, a big thing for me was stretching. Was stretching and loosening up and making sure that my limbs and my joints weren't getting too tight and tense.
That's awesome. Sweet. Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of yoga because I learned a lot of things about yoga, and I'd love to get your opinion on it. I think the biggest thing yoga really helped me with was my ego. Just because you really got to learn that you're not going to power through a lot of these positions. You got to learn how to align your body, and the position comes naturally.
Right.
And I'll just give the example of like my first headstand and handstand. Understanding that if I were to align my spine perfectly, my legs pretty much lift themselves. I'm not trying to like really push off or squeeze my core, like understanding those parts of your body is just like pretty incredible. So I think as an athlete, anyone can benefit off that because you learn, first of all, true posture, and you learn alignment and muscle activation. Because I learned to activate muscles I never even knew I had on my body, like it's pretty incredible. So I love that answer, and I'm a huge fan of yoga as well. So my last question for you, I guess, is, you've had all these honestly amazing experiences throughout your entire career as a player, as a performance coach, and now assistant coach at a very good program. What is the one thing that you would tell young Mike coming into college? Because, it's recruiting season right now. Kids are going into their freshman year of college. It's a very stressful transition for a lot of us, especially like, you moved pretty far away from home, and you're stuck on an island. It's not really easy. Like you can't drive home over the weekend. What's some advice that you have to young Mike and I guess kids going into college nowadays?
I'm a little biased because I was a performance trainer, but get yourself in the best shape of your life. Coming in, I wouldn't say crazy out of shape, but I was mildly out of shape. And it really showed, and it affected my trajectory. It affected how I was rising through the program. I think I wasted a year, if I'm being honest. My freshman year, I had the capability to play, and I would showcase that at times. But I think I'll say two things: getting yourself in the best shape of your life, and then being a sponge. A lot of times you're in the middle of it, and you're just like, this goes into mental health too. You're just trying to survive. Like freshman year, you're sometimes you're just trying to survive and make it through practice. You're trying not to get yelled at. You're, trying to absorb all the themes and all the concepts that coaches are throwing at you and stuff like that. You can get yourself in the best shape of your life. You don't have to worry about a lot of that stuff because it's going to take care of itself. You're going to work your tail off, and you'll learn from being aggressive. And so that was the biggest thing for me. Is a lot of times I wanted to be hesitant. I wanted to back off. I didn't want to put myself out there because I didn't know if I was ready for it or not. Especially in that first year, I'd say. And so, yeah, getting yourself in the best shape and then being a sponge, trying to understand everything.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate you hopping onto this podcast with us. I'm super excited to just kind of see you excel with your career at the University of Hawaii and being their assistant. I know that you guys are looking real nice coming into this year. You guys are going to have two of your key players coming back after suffering injuries last year. So super excited to watch them be back on the court and watch you guys have a great season next year. Appreciate you, Mike. Thanks for hopping onto the podcast.
My man. Thank you, James.
Yeah, have a good one.